Hello and welcome. I am Steve Clemens, editor-at-large of The Hill. Thank you for joining us on the third day of the 2020 Democratic National Convention. As you know, we at The Hill are using our virtual platforms to keep up a steady drumbeat, a really steady drumbeat of coverage and conversations throughout this day and week. You can watch our events and catch up on the latest news on our conventions hub at thehill.com. I'd like to thank our sponsor, the American Petroleum Institute, for their support of today's event. This morning, we're going to look back at the second night of convention speeches and take a look at how the American voter might respond in November. Before we get underway, a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at @TheHillEvents using the hashtag #TheHill2020. Very simple. We are broadcasting live. And as with any live stream, you could experience occasional trouble with the video. I laugh when I read this because they say refreshing the page should, in most cases, fix the problem. I feel like I'm leading you on an airplane. Good luck with it. My first guest is the Majority Whip in the House of Representatives. He is the highest-ranked African-American in Congress and one of the few civil rights activists from the 1960s still in elected office. He's a past chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus and a man who many of his colleagues turn to for counsel. We all know Congressman Clyburn's endorsement of candidate Joe Biden played a big role in putting him on the path to the party's nomination. Welcome, Congressman Clyburn. It's great to see you again. Let me just start out. Everyone I know and all the writing, and particularly after your speech last night, said Jim Clyburn is the kingmaker. And so how does that feel? I mean, and how are you going to if Joe Biden wins the presidency, what does a kingmaker do in turning that in to tangible stuff?
I don't know, because I don't consider myself to be a kingmaker at all. I only reflected what I was hearing among my constituents. I've told the story of a Mrs. Jones, who I did not know, who engaged me at a church in my congressional district and said to me, she wanted to know from me who I was supporting, who I was going to vote for in this election. And she said, if you don't want anybody to hear you, just whisper it in my ear. And I did as she asked. But when I did, she snapped back, and the look that was on her face when she said to me, I needed to hear that, and this community needs to hear from you. And that's when I decided that I would make my endorsement in the manner I did, because she convinced me, and I talked to people afterwards. I became convinced that the community was waiting to hear from me. And so I don't call that a kingmaker at all. I was only validating to the people of my congressional district that Joe Biden was a good guy to vote for. And so that was the background to that. Not a kingmaker at all.
Well, typical modesty. And you and I have talked about that before. But yesterday on this show, we had Julian Castro. And Julian Castro was talking about, America's Latino community and said, the Democrats may be winning this battle in getting support from the Latino community, but losing the war. That it may not be doing a deep enough engagement and inclusion of the Hispanics in this. And he said, we're getting it by. But it was a very stark comment. And I'm just interested, now with the selection of Kamala Harris, you were a member of the vetting committee. How is the Democratic National Committee's franchise with the black voter in America? Do you feel that there's any danger of winning the battle and losing the war with the black community, or are things solid?
Well, I've been in politics a long time. I just had my 80th birthday.
Congratulations.
John Lewis and I first met as 20-year-old college students. And we've been in politics for more than 60 years. I have heard that every campaign that the Democrats take blacks for granted. I know we're always going to hear something to that effect. The fact of the matter is, I think that Joe Biden is the choice of African Americans, Hispanic Americans. He is the choice of white Americans who feel that this country's democracy is worth preserving. That is what's on the ballot this year. The democratic future of this great democracy is on the ballot. And if we are not careful we will find ourselves in a very dire situation. When we look up one day, you see the post office is gone. That is enshrined in our Constitution. And we'll see other freedoms and other entities enshrined in our Constitution gone away. That's what we have got to stay focused on now. If John Lewis were here today, he would say, keep your eyes on the prize. And that's what the prize is. The prize is the perseverance of this country and the reserve in the Constitution that has kept us together all of this time. Look at the post office, and we hear about the post office today. There's nothing more central to keeping this country united than the Postal Service. It's not a business, it's a service. And this whole notion that we got to get rid of the post office because they've been losing money. The post office ain't losing money. The post office, you're paying for a service to keep this country together. And that's what this campaign is all about. This notion that everything that the government does is supposed to make a profit. That's why we have so many students in debt today, because we started making a profit of student loans. We ought to be assistant students to get an education and to get what is the boundaries of this society, not making a profit off them to go to school and then spend half of their lives paying back a debt.
Right.
That is what we got to get beyond.
Article 1, Section 8, Clause 7 is the postal clause in the U.S. Constitution. And you have expressed doubt in the Postmaster General's assurances that they are going to stop the transition that they had put into place. What do you need to hear from the Postmaster General before we proceed in the election to have confidence that the post office will survive this moment and that the post office will not become part of an election debacle?
We need to hear from him some honesty. We know that he met with the president, I understand, in the Oval Office a few days before he made these announcements. We need to rescind all of that stuff. We need to say to the post office employees, and I hear from them, they are not public because they want to keep their jobs, but they're telling me that somebody is sabotaging the Postal Service, not just because of voting. They can't get prescription out to people. They can't get the kind of service to these communities that they have been doing all of this time because they're now saying, we're taking out these sorting machines. What's that about? Why are we removing these mailboxes from African-American communities? This is a sinister stuff, and we know it is. And we got to call them out for it. Put those sorting machines back into those post offices where they were. Put people back to work. Stop denying overtime pay so people can get their work done. Hire new postal employees. We aren't here to make a profit off of them. We're here to keep this country together and to keep moving forward in a way that this great Constitution that's kept this country together all of this time. I've been saying forever that the post office is the thread that keeps this fabric of this country together. And we should not allow it to be destroyed. So I want to hear from him that he is going to do what the postal office is supposed to do.
Congressman, there have been rumors that there may be some new activity around getting a CARES package successor, a new stimulus package, dealing with, the impact of coronavirus. What are you hearing? What are the prospects of that?
As you know, the House is coming back to Washington on Saturday, and we're going to vote on the new package. It will include the post office and other things as well. We already sent, 12 weeks ago, we sent the so-called HEROES package over to the Senate. Mitch McConnell told us at the time he was not going to let anything out of the Senate that the president is not supporting. So I would assume that if the post office would be the postmaster is not trying to sabotage it, he'll be supporting this legislation that we are putting forward, and the president will tell Mitch McConnell to put it on the floor for a vote. If he does, I think it will pass. And the question then will be, will the president sign it? So we'll know soon, because we're coming back on Saturday and we're going to pass it. As you know, I'm the vote counter, and I can tell you right now, the votes are there in the House to pass it. Let's see what the Senate will do.
Congressman, you've also said that you're going to chair hearings that look into Operation Warp Speed and how it's been making decisions. One of the things I've been looking at is the composite of leadership in the companies that have received funding or not received funding. The new CEO of the Biotechnology Innovation Organization is an African-American woman. But when you look across these companies, all of them except one are white males that are CEOs, white males that are head of research. There is a company called Innovio where the head of it is a South Korean American gentleman named Joseph Kim, and his director of research is a woman who is now there. So I'm just interested, is that going to be part of this, of looking at inclusivity and whether or not the Trump administration is making decisions that are non-scientific?
Well, don't want to get out in front of any investigations. One of the things we're looking at regarding warp speed is whether or not they're being transparent. We are hearing from a lot of people. As you know, we put up what we call a line. We just are saying to people, please give us a call if you see something taking place untoward. Well, we be getting calls, and we're looking into these things. And Operation Warp Speed is one of the entities that we've received phone calls about. And so we've sent them a letter, and we've asked them to respond to some questions that we have posed. And once they respond, we'll decide where we go from there. We've done the same thing, as you know, with Kodak. $765 million, a camera company to do pharmaceutical stuff. That's not in their portfolio. It never has been. So these kinds of things we are looking into, and I do not want to be public about what we'll do until such time as we get their responses to the letters we've sent them.
Congressman, last time we spoke, we had a fascinating discussion about statues, about the difference between a John Calhoun and a Ulysses Grant. And you said we need to deliberate, we need to sit around the table, we need to talk about these issues. And you had legislation that you put forward on basically removing those people who had been protectors of the slave trade, that had been defenders of bigotry and racism. Where is that process now? I know that the John Calhoun statue has come down, but where are you in that broad process of working with your colleagues in discussing our memorials to figures in the past?
Well, these things, all that you've talked about, we passed it in the House. Once again, it's over in the Senate. I've been telling people the House is only 1/3 of the process. The Senate is the 2/3, and the White House is the 3rd. So we've got 1/3, and they've got 2/3. Hopefully, they will agree with us and do what is necessary to help this country find common ground. We are faced with some serious issues involving disparities in healthcare, in education, and in the people that we honor. And we shouldn't say to school children that come up to visit the Capitol and they see these statues and you start explaining to them, well, this is the guy that led the insurrection against the United States of America. And this is the guy who was the vice president of the Confederacy. This is the guy who promoted the slave trade. John C. Calhoun, we have his statue up there representing South Carolina. We ought to take it out of there. And so what we're saying, we can't tell the states who to send up, but we can pass a law that says these statues, you can put them over in a museum someplace, and if you want somebody that represents your state to be up here, send us somebody that represents your state, not represent a state of being for people of color that we have gotten beyond in this country.
Let me just ask you finally, Congressman, thank you so much for your time. I don't think I am getting this wrong, but oftentimes during conventions, there are rah-rah moments. Everything's easy. You've got platforms. You can you throw your, confetti around and all of that. Heavy lifting comes later. On the side of dismantling systemic racism, of dealing with racial injustice in America, what are the several concrete things that this administration needs to put in its first 100 days, if it wins in November, to give traction to a lot of what's being thrown around in the convention when it comes to racial justice?
The first thing we need to do is really get a hold of this pandemic. That is a threat to everybody in this country. This virus knows no racial lines, no social levels. This virus is attacking everybody. That's the first thing we need to do. And you'll do that by putting in place a national program of testing, of tracing, of isolating, and treating. Those four things must be nationalized. We can't leave that up to the states. The second thing we need to do is focus on what we do to make healthcare delivery efficient, effective, and equitable in this country. And I believe that among the first things the next administration ought to do is get broadband into every home in this country. If we do that, we can have telehealth for everybody. We can have online learning for everybody. We had a problem with educating our children before this pandemic. Now, a lot of young people are going to lose a second year of school. We have universities closing down over this country, sending people home, and the only way they're going to be able to further their education is to have online learning. And if you don't have the internet in your homes and you're asked to stay at home, you aren't going to get educated. So that's the second thing I think we need to do. And we need to have a network of community health centers all over this country. And so I'm asking the next administration to get people healthy. And once you get people healthy, then you can work on developing the economy and doing what needs to be done for persistent poverty communities all over this country. But get people healthy first.
Well, Congressman Jim Clyburn, it's always a pleasure to spend time with you. Thank you so much for your thoughts today.
Thank you very much for having me.